Good evening. I'd like to call the meeting to order. This is the meeting of the West Hartford Public Schools Board of Education for Wednesday, September 23rd. And Cammie, can you please call the roll?
Ms. Arrington, present. Dr. Chang.
Here.
Ms. Poland.
Here.
Dr. Steinberg.
Here.
Dr. Thomas Barkson.
Here.
Ms. Wilcox.
Here.
Mr. Zupanowitz.
Here.
Student Representative Wilbur Sneed. Here. Rachel Mirabelli.
Here.
Thank you. And Lily, will you please lead us in the pledge?
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. We do not have a revision to the agenda order, so we will move to public communications. Before we begin public communications, I just want to announce that beginning at the meeting, our next meeting on October 6th, we will institute a new process for public communications. We'll have a form available on the West Hartford Public Schools website. You can indicate your wish to speak during public communications by filling out the form with simply your name, your address, your email address, and your phone number up until about 6:30 on the night of the board meeting. That will allow us to have a better sense of your name and your address, which is better for accurately reflecting who you are in our minutes, and also helps us to get to know who it is we're calling on as opposed to calling on you by your phone number. If you don't have an opportunity to fill out the form, that's okay. You can still call in. We're just going to call on the folks who do the form first before we move on to those who have not done so. So for tonight, I'm seeing that we do have some callers. The person whose phone number ends in 04, do you wish to speak? Moving on to 28, the person whose phone number ends in 28. Okay, how about 47?
Hi, that's me. Am I supposed to say?
Yep. You can go ahead and give your name and address, please.
Sorry, what was that?
Can you give your name and address, please, and then you can give your comments. You'll have 3 minutes.
Sorry, I'm like, you on Heather Walls, 56 or 52 Ridgewood Road, West Hartford, Connecticut.
Great, and you can give us your comments, and you'll have 3 minutes.
Oh, right now?
Yes, if you'd like. Otherwise, you can wait
I don't
until
have any comments. I was just calling in to listen about what's going on with school.
Oh, okay, that's fine. You don't have to provide comment if you don't want to. That's fine.
Yeah, I just wanted to listen. Okay.
You're very welcome to do so. Is there anyone else on the line who'd like to provide public comment this evening?
Yeah.
Okay, you're up.
Hi. Yes, David. Last name is pronounced Mazzei, 72 Hartwell Road in West Hartford. And my question relates to distance learning for elementary schools with regard to whenever a regular teacher is out. This would pertain especially to those who give advance warning. We have a circumstance in our family where a 5th grader was notified that their teacher will not be available in the next day or two. And my question is it not the policy to provide some sort of a substitute, a para, a TA, or some other person? As we all know, distance learning was really a debacle in the spring, primarily because there was no direct human contact, well, indirectly human contact with the teacher. It was all online stuff, and no, connection was made. And my feeling is that if teacher is going to be out, that the school board or the school online academy or wherever we're calling it should make a provision to have someone fill in. It's this human element is extremely important for the children. And being told that, well, they're going to be extra work is going to be assigned to them, to me is not acceptable. The second comment I have relates to the assessment process or testing that would be done for the online students to see whether they're maintaining a grade level, efficiency and not falling terribly behind. I don't know the mechanisms that were going through to construct a curriculum online that would be comparable to the in-school curriculum. Is that your understanding, that they're pretty much equal? The materials being covered online is pretty much what's being given in class? Hello?
Hi, yes. So the Board of Ed cannot make comments in response to any of the public comments. However, I will say that I suspect that you're going to hear some of your answers that you're looking for during tonight's meeting.
Okay. Lastly, and I won't belabor the point, is there a way that the public can email to get answers to questions that would, pertain to student learning online and get a response back? I sent several emails over the summer, and I realized that it probably wasn't the best circumstance. I did not get one response, and I was a little frustrated by it because I felt I had some pretty wide ranging questions, and I didn't see any materials in any of the letters that came from the superintendent that kind of touch on those areas. And, is there a mechanism where a person can make a comment or ask a question or make a suggestion and get some sort of feedback?
So again, I want to thank you for your response, and I know it sounds ironic that I'm going to say I can't respond to your question, but you have been heard, and I suspect you're going to get some answers tonight. Thank you.
Bye.
Are there any other members of the public who wish to comment tonight?
Hi, actually, is there any chance I could ask a question really quickly? It's Heather Walsh. Who was just
Again,
before.
you may, but just to note that you may not we will not be able to respond because the board does not respond to
Fine,
public comments.
I'll go quick.
That's
I'll go
fine.
quick. So my child's remote. If school opens and goes back like fully open in October, what's going on with the remote kids if they don't want to go back?
So we're gonna,
Or if we don't want to.
I understand that we are gonna be hearing about that later on.
Yelling at her kids.
Oh, yeah.
Okay. All right, thank you. Are there other members of the public who wish to make comments this evening? And I'm just gonna ask if you're not speaking, if you could mute.
Like, people call in.
I don't know who that is, but, so are you gonna answer my question? I don't know who's talking in the background, I can't hear, but, again, this is Heather. Will you answer that possibly in tonight's call?
I think it's very likely we're gonna hear the answer tonight. So I just,
Okay. Thank
okay.
you. Okay, I'm gonna mute. I got it. Thank you.
Are there other members of the public who wish to make comments this evening? Okay. We are gonna move on, and I will ask you, if you're on the call, to please mute yourself. And I will also mute my computer. Here we go. All right. There are no items for unfinished business. Under new business, item A, a motion by Amanda Aronson, Lorna Thomas Farquharson, and Mark Zdanowitz to approve the Series C19 COVID-19 policies and regulations. The recommendation is that the Board of Education approve the following policy: Series C19 COVID-19 policies and regulations. And I think we're going to have a brief discussion, but first, can we get, I guess the motion has been made, or can you just make a motion, I guess?
Sure, Amanda Aronson, so moved.
And a second, please? by Lorna. Great, thank you. And discussion.
Do you want to introduce it, Amanda?
Sure. Can you hear me okay? Okay, so this is regarding policy issues. So as public members, at this past winter, we adopted our model policy, so everything in the district is up to speed, and we are in compliance and totality of everything that we need to be doing regarding our work in the district. But the challenges of COVID have presented some new challenges for the way we operate. So we needed to make some temporary changes to address those to meet the needs of the new school environment. Things like cleaning procedures, requesting that parents drive their kids to school if they can, things regarding face masks, meeting virtually. So this is really just a series of amendments to, sorry, I got out of breath when I was doing something else. So this is just a series of temporary amendments to our existing policies. So they'll stay in effect until July 30th, 2021, at the end of our fiscal year. So that way we can meet the needs of things that arise. Some of those things might pertain to an executive order by the governor or something from the CDC, but it also just makes sure that we stay in compliance with our federal laws, with the Connecticut plan to adapt, advance, and achieve, and also the Families First Coronavirus Response Act. So I would move that we would accept that. That would be helpful to us in our work.
Just a couple of things that I appreciate that, Amanda, absolutely correct. In the need, as we had talked about before, to just stay current on this. As you know, this is a ever-changing situation, and this just allows us not to have to try and keep up with every governmental, sorry, it's the Brayburn mask tonight. Every government change, everything that the governor sends out. This way we can guarantee that shipment is keeping us current on this. The only thing I would add is that it does sunset on June 30th of 2021 unless we change that earlier. And then the only other piece is that in order to go ahead and adopt this tonight, you actually have to do it in two sections. You have to have a motion to suspend your policy 8310, which requires 2 readings. And then you have to have a motion to adopt the temporary policies and regulations related to the COVID-19 pandemic as prepared by the board council.
If I could, there's kind of 2 strategies with this in terms of keeping up with everything that's going. Some districts have gone to a policy basically ceding board authority to the superintendent, which I haven't asked for. Frankly, I don't want, I've got enough. And this just makes sure that, whereas Andy and Amanda said, make sure we're following the law. And it's the kind of things we have to do no matter what, whether or not this is passed or not, we still have to go about doing it. But this says the letter of the land, the law of the land becomes the law of the letter within our policy books.
Policy 8310.10. So actually, we have a motion already on the table. So I guess I'm going to ask the motioners
Of the initial to withdraw.
Motion to withdraw that motion.
Yep.
Hi, Amanda Aronson, the motion to withdraw, or withdrawing the motion to,
And the second,
Yeah.
Superintendent Ferguson, second that. Great. Now we can take a motion to suspend 8310.
Superintendent Ferguson, move that we suspend policy 8310.
Is there a second?
second, Amanda Aronson.
Great, thank you. A discussion on that? Now, Andy, did you say we can't actually vote on that piece tonight?
No, you can actually. You need to vote to suspend 8310, and then you need to take the motion back to approve the COVID-19 packet as prepared by Shipman and Goodwin.
So is there discussion on the motion to suspend 8310? If not, I'll try your minds. All those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, nay. Abstentions? The ayes have it. Moving on, I'm looking for
So moved, Amanda Aronson.
Thank you. And a second?
Second, Lorna Thomas Ferguson.
Great. And is there additional discussion on this motion? I'll just indicate, just to give the public an idea of some of the policies included
Sure.
here.
Would you like me to read through a summary?
Yeah, a couple of bullets would be great.
Okay.
Just so we have an idea.
Okay. There is the policy on health and safety protocols, the Family First Coronavirus Response Act policy, green cleaning programs, use of school facilities, visitors, volunteers, all have changes. We have some changes to personnel policies about employment, the use of district computer systems, obviously for some online components. There's changes to the series, 5,000 students, on attendance, on health assessments, on student discipline, on transportation, on privately owned technology devices, on meeting conduct for the board, on public meetings, executive sessions, and on the notice of the time and place of meetings. And so that's, but again, this is ever-changing. This actually changed just this week when the governor changed again the mask policies for the 3-year-old and more for preschool. And so this changed just recently.
Once these policies are approved, I assume they'll be up on our website somewhere, so people can see them.
Once these policies are approved, yes. Once we go through with Shipman and backstop them all, yes.
Great. Other questions on this motion? If not, I'll try your minds. All those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. All those opposed, nay. Abstentions? And the ayes have it, and the motion passes.
Great, thank you.
Moving on to new business, item B, the ratification of the West Hartford Public School Nurses Association contract. And the recommendation is that the Board of Education ratify the negotiated agreement between the West Hartford Public Schools Nurses Association and the Board of Education for the period of July 1st, 2020 through June 30th, 2024. And can we have a motion, please?
So moved.
Thank you, Lorna. And a second? Thank you, Jason. And discussion. We'll have Rick give us a brief summary.
Good evening, everyone. Rick Ledwith. Before you for approval is a ratified agreement between the Board of Education and our Nurses Association. And before we get into the details of the agreement, we just wanted to take a moment to acknowledge the work of our nurses who, in normal times, obviously are there to assist our students who might be sick. They oversee the administration of medication and certainly are there day in and day out to provide physical, emotional, and social support to all of our students. And today, we know they're carrying an even larger responsibility in helping us, assisting us all summer in COVID-19 preventive planning, the schools up and running, the health and safety plans that are assisting us in mitigating the spread of COVID-19 in each of our facilities. So to say that we have a deep appreciation and respect for what our nurses do day in and day out would be truly an understatement. So we appreciate the work that they do for all of us, for our students and for us as professional colleagues. And I know the Board of Education understands that. So to get into the terms of the agreement, it is a 4-year contract. It calls for a wage increase of 2.5% for this fiscal year, a wage freeze for the upcoming fiscal year, and then a 2.5% wage increase in each of the following 2 years. So the last 2 years of the agreement would call for 2.5% wage increase in each of those 2 years. So when we sat down to negotiate the contract, and Andy and Liz Hewitt were involved as well, it was right at the beginning of the pandemic. At that point, we knew the economic environment looked bleak, certainly, but we didn't know exactly what the future held for us at that point. We did know we would probably need some concessions from our nurses to consider in terms of reaching an agreement with them as we headed into this fiscal year. And they recognized the economic environment. They worked with us, and we're very grateful for them for agreeing to a wage freeze for the upcoming fiscal year. We do have a wage reopener in the contract for that second year, so in the event that the economy comes out, is better than what we anticipated, if the state and federal funding came through and any kind of budget shortfalls that we're anticipating potentially would be taken care of with that funding, then that would give us the flexibility to sit back down at the table to talk about a different kind of wage increase for next year. We're not confident that that's going to happen, but it's there in the event that we do need it. In terms of healthcare changes, folks may remember we joined the state partnership plan 2 years ago. So this is our second year that we've been in the state partnership plan, and it continues to pay dividends for the school district. And we are going to be increasing the healthcare contributions for our nurses who participate in the state partnership plan from 19% up to 21%. In terms of pension changes, we did freeze the pension plan back in 2010 to any new participants. So anyone who was participating in the plan prior to 2010 is in our pension plan, and they will see their pension contribution increase from 5% up to 6.5%. Anyone hired after 2010 is in a 401k type of plan. It's called a defined contribution plan. And we will increase the employer contribution, the employer match into that DC plan from 6% to 7%. And then the only other changes in the contract are more administrative in nature. So we did have some language in there about internal posting. When a position becomes available during the school year, we've changed the way we would post that internally. And then we also have some language in there about attending department and faculty meetings. So that summarizes the agreement. We'd be happy to answer any questions that the board had prior to voting.
Thank you. Do board members have any questions? All right. I will try your minds. All those in favor of ratifying the negotiated agreement, please signify by saying aye. Aye. All those opposed say nay. Abstentions? The ayes have it. Thank you.
Thank you.
Moving on to staff communications and reports and the superintendent's report.
Okay, so I don't want to reiterate everything I said in the communication home today, but I do think it's important to discuss. And really, I think most of my updates as my team presents on various topics as we go through the year appropriately, I would assume most of the superintendent's updates will be where we stand with coronavirus and what's happening at that time. So, as people know, we had our third positive case today. We were notified late yesterday, early evening actually, and I want to thank Andy, who works contact tracing throughout the night and in contact with the West Hartford Bloomfield Health District to make sure we can go through everything, make decisions, identify any people that could be affected, and then this morning we went to check out the schools, and then my first discussion with Andy was around mid-morning that we have another positive case. So what I want to talk about is kind of the thought process that goes into this and how this has changed, because I do think that there is, you get the governor talking about districts you shouldn't ever close if you have this. You get districts that have closed. You get language like deep cleaning out there. And you get people already saying, well, we've already had three many. Why have we had three? That's too many. Sometimes we forget West Hartford's a big district. We're a big community. We're the 10th largest district in the state of Connecticut. I went through the list, and from what I can find, we've had the least of those 10 districts that are listed. But 3 isn't going to be the end of this, and what people might think they see as a cluster isn't necessarily a cluster, because you could get from one case, if you've got a family structure there that okay, those siblings aren't in school, but now they've tested after a first test, if it's somebody that's a student or a teacher, or some way you go through this where you could end up with 3 or 4 positive cases in different settings that people think the spread is within the school, but it actually isn't. It's outside of the school. Same thing could happen with older kids in college. You know, everything talking about college, is this happening in the classroom? It's not happening in the classroom. It's happening when people are together. The same thing could happen here. One positive case could likely mean a couple more positives depending on what happened over a weekend. It does not mean, however, that the spread has occurred in school. Andy was on a call with the Department of Public Health yesterday, and they made it clear that of every case that's affected schools in the state of Connecticut, 0 have been tracked to the cause being the school. The nexus has not been from the school, and they haven't seen spread within the school. Now, they've seen spread in a youth sport. They've seen spread in people getting together. It's just so important that, you know, we have to be those parents that we don't necessarily want to be. If a child's wearing a mask all day, I believe I am safe. Sitting next to Ari, I believe I'm safe in this room. People are wearing masks. If Ari and I then leave, take our masks off, and ride in the same car together for 20 minutes and go get dinner, well, then we've undone what we've done during the day. And that's something we have to keep in mind with our kids. So one of the things we look for is we identify, and this is why seating charts are so important, and that the principal has access to them and the teachers, so that we can look at the seating chart and identify, okay, if it's a teacher, who's here where a teacher's moving? If it's a student, who's around that student? And what we mean is 6 feet in 15 minutes or more of extended time. Now, when we thought about this during the summer and you do game plans, it seemed to me that it was going to be easier at the elementary school because they're limited in a cohort, and at the high school it'd be more difficult because they move place to place. The truth is, if we get a positive case, or when we get a positive case at elementary school, because of the duration of the day and movement that inevitably happens, it's more likely that you're putting an entire class into quarantine with the teacher into quarantine, and then they would just be online learning for whatever the time that quarantine is for 2 weeks. Whereas in high school and middle school, where there is some movement, you're tracking where that positive case was. And I think it's important, I think people sometimes mistake this. Because you are sitting next to me doesn't make you a positive case, and now the person next to you in another class that's not related, that's not somebody that goes into quarantine. It's not a connection of a positive. It's not the transitive property. It's directly to that positive case. And talking to other superintendents that have been in longer, that have had cases early on, and then it's moved on from that, we expect to be able to move on from these. But, you know, a couple things that come up as far as would we close for deep cleaning. We do deep cleaning every night. It's something that I kind of wish people wouldn't say that, because we're doing that protocol every night. We wouldn't do anything differently if we closed for a day. And that's why we're, you know, kind of cleaning out the building of people at the end of the day, so we have the time to do that. We could close if we didn't have time to do the contact tracing. If I had gotten a notification at 11 o'clock last night instead of at 6:30 last night, or 6 o'clock, 6:30, we wouldn't have been able to do the tracing, and we wouldn't have been able to identify. We may have had to close just preventatively for a day. That's a possibility. Where it wouldn't be a closure, we'd move to online learning for that day. So that's something we see. I had people, you know, more than one say this morning, the dashboard isn't updated. I want to disabuse some people the notion, and a couple people that emailed were great about it when I let them know. I don't have people doing a dashboard. That's Andy. That's me. And so it's kind of like we're trying to keep up during the day. So we do post those, and the reason we have that dashboard is that we do keep people informed. There is going to be one change made to the dashboard, whereas right now I have staff and students separated out. And the truth is, I need to put them together for privacy reasons. Just because if there's one staff member quarantined in a whole building, and then somebody's teacher's absent that day, people think, well, my teacher's in, and we've seen this come up where people are searching and trying to match, and we just can't have that. I know people want to know, you need to tell me at least, was that child in my class? You need to at least tell me what grade that child is in. We can't. Yeah, I said it from the first communication in the summer, and I say it now. We have to protect privacy. We're combining right now HIPAA and people's health privacy, FERPA and the public school privacy of students, and employee privacy concerns, all together in this one melange, while trying to be as open as we can so that the community knows there's nothing we're trying to keep from people. We want to be as informative as possible because trust is so important right now. And the reason that trust is so important, and I appreciate it so much, is because when we say you haven't been within contact, people might want to say, well, how do I know that? And it's, well, you have to trust us. And you have to trust the local health district and the people that are going through all of this information. So that's where we are now. We try to send out the information as much as we can. So what does this mean? 'Cause I've already had people in the past week, I've gotten a lot of emails, hybrid is working, you should stay in hybrid. I've also gotten a lot of emails, when can you get out of hybrid? We have to accept, and I say this to all of you because you're on the board, and I say this for me. This is a year where I'm not going to please everybody. It just is impossible because people have different desires. And I got emails the moment we sent out notifications last night and today, well, this means you have to stay in hybrid, right? You can't possibly go to full. No, this actually doesn't impact that at this point. Of course it does mentally for all of us, where there's a moment of, okay, we need to look at this, what's happening. But this doesn't mean there's been a spike. The numbers in West Hartford, the numbers on the dashboard, and people want to look at addendum 4 is what we've talked about of where are we as far as green, yellow, red in terms of what we should be doing. The state's numbers have gone up, and the state's positivity rate has hovered between 1.0 and 1.6 in terms of test positivity. West Hartford's last week was 0.5. Now Hartford's was high, and we're right on the border. So we have this, a disease doesn't know town's borders. We have to be aware of this. But right now, and talking to other districts that are beginning to phase in like we've talked about doing, we're still on track on October 13th to look at elementaries coming back first, and elementaries with all students coming back and moving away from a hybrid. That doesn't affect at-home learning at all. People that are in the remote learning environment will stay in the remote learning environment. That doesn't shift their world at all. And questions about remote learning environment, I can say, please, we've had principal coffees now. We've had communication out. Check your emails if you haven't gotten that there may be a reason for it, and communicate with the school. Both of those are on our website. You can find the information there and contacts and concerns. So what does it mean when we come back? Elementaries, I feel pretty comfortable that we can come back to our regular schedule if things don't shift for the worse in West Hartford. If they do, we'll adjust. And I've said to people, I expect, the reality is there's a chance we're in all 3 versions of this school this year at different times. But it's still a goal to get our students back, as we stated, from the summer till now. Again, at the elementary schools, if we look at positives in that age group, they're still not high across the state. They're very low. We do believe that the impact on families, getting our kids back together in school, the success of hybrid, I think, has been important to learn lessons from and to move forward with, and to get people's anxiety levels down as we come back, and now people are back in. I think we're only talking 2.5 weeks for people that want to rush this. I think in 2.5 weeks, we'll be in a position, and our plan is to move forward with bringing our kids back. Now, some of the things that means, like outside, if you're a neighbor of a school, you're going to see a trailer basically at all of our schools because we have to rent trailer spaces to put some of our furniture into that will be coming and going based on the number of kids inside of a building. Lunches at elementary school, we will space out in spaces. You know, it won't just be classroom, it won't just be outside. We can use the cafeteria with children spread out. That's actually advisable as opposed to having 20 in a classroom. So we'll spread our kids out. And at the elementary, we can vary our lunchtime so much because our numbers are not big. And our elementaries are basically, even when we all go back, typically operating now at about an 80% full rate because of the number of people that opted out. High school and middle school are different, and both of them, to bring them back, which we won't do the same weeks, we want to see how it goes, could be a week or two later. We're going to have to change the schedule from what last year's schedule was. And I think what you're going to see at the high school is the day end at about 1:15-ish and have grab and go lunch at that point. So the 4 block periods will meet, and then at 1:15 the day will end. Now, for people that's saying that's a half day, it's not a half day of instruction at all. Typical high school lunches are 45 minutes. That's what they were last year. That's what they'll be when we go back to our schedule. So this actually carves out an hour for lunch. But when you think there used to be 8 periods in a day, so that means there's 8 passing periods of 4 minutes each. Well, I'm reclaiming 4 of those passing periods. So that's 15 minutes. That's the 15 minutes that you're giving up then and turning it into instruction. So we feel like if we end school then with grab and go lunch, kids can go home, kids can have lunch. If a child is staying for sports, which is basically the only reason to stay, we'll have an area mapped out where they can eat. We'll have an area mapped out where they can study. At the middle school, it's basically 2 options. Either that, where they're leaving at the same time, but more likely because of transportation and schedules, although this is not finalized, we're still developing this, we could have 3 blocks dismiss for lunch, and then the last block of the day, you're home, and that's an online block for our middle school students. So a quarter of their day, one of their 4 teachers, is an at-home learning experience. The thing is, I can't have 1,500 kids at Conard or 1,500 kids at Hall having lunch in the cafeteria with their masks off. I just can't find a way to do it. There are other schools that have said their high schools are not going, that they're in hybrid all year long. We still want to bring our kids back. The only way to do that is to not have a large setting where they eat. This works for that. More will come on this information as time comes. For the elementary, it'll be pretty much what we've seen in the past, other than there'll be far more lunch waves and rotating kids through differently in our buildings. For middle school and high school, we're working on changing those schedules now, but we think we have some pretty good solutions, and I thank Mr. Vicinis for that. So, that's where we are. Questions?
For that update. One of the things that I remember from earlier conversations about the reopening plan, or one of the concerns was about the HVAC system, and I'm wondering if, in the course of the last few weeks, if you learned anything about the schools, and 'cause I know that's been a concern for both employees and for parents, and if there's any new information that you've gathered from that experience.
Yeah, so we've had our HVAC consultants in, and we can maximize airflow within those buildings. So that's one key element. So that's done, and we're utilizing the tools that we have to maximize it. One of the other big things that we've learned, Jason, is really from those schools that there's a few that have not gone hybrid, smaller districts, but that smaller district has a smaller footprint, and they have not seen that spread. from HVAC. So some of those concerns we're not seeing, and we're not seeing during this time period. So that certainly makes us feel better, and there's been a lot of articles written about that across the country. So even those schools that have air conditioning, when they contact traceback, and we've seen this in Georgia and Florida, where they've had massive amounts of return, has that led to a spread tied back to their HVAC? They haven't seen that in anything that I've seen yet, and Andy and I keep track of that, and that's actually one of the discussion points people have had, is that they have not seen a spread within the schools. So we're learning that, and fortunately, those schools went back to school about a month before we did, and actually by using air conditioning, they're using even different HVAC systems that are more likely, in a lot of ways, to see some spread. So the big concern that a lot of people ask is, okay, well, we know our building, the fresh air system's open windows. What happens when it gets cold? What happens is our heating bill's going up a lot. And that's just the truth, because we're still going to have open windows in some of those schools in some places. It may be cracked, it may be, and again, we're talking to the consultants about how do we do this and how do we cycle through. But yeah, our heating bills this year are going to be large. Somebody asked Mr. Vicinis, what's our strategy for children when it's chilly out and when they need to get a mask break, and he held up a jacket, because those are the kind of things, like, we think of the problems, but we have some old-fashioned solutions. We still have recess when it's cold out, and so these are the kind of things that, we're still looking at. Mark asked last time, and this actually speaks to that question. So are you more likely to see, Mark asked about snow days, because logically, he is correct. We get a bad forecast the night before. Far better for me just to say, tomorrow's a distance learning day. The state Department of Education still will not approve that. I have other superintendents that have asked, other boards that have asked, and they have not gotten a response yet. I have to believe common sense will win out as time gets closer to the winter, and that will be approved. Because technically, if I just said that Wednesday, well, we're in distance learning, then that would be acceptable. But me saying we're in distance learning because of weather isn't acceptable. That strains credulity at this point. And so hopefully that gets changed, because that's the kind of thing, whereas a bitter cold day that Andy and I may be more inclined than some others, just as a brutally hot day, to say, well, we're in session, and a bitterly cold day, instead of having windows open, if we can opt into a at-home learning day, whereas that may not be convenient, we're not saying that's something we want to do, it's something that could be a possibility, we need approval from the state still to do that. So that's another thing, a learning point that we've had discussions. I was on a call with 30 superintendents the other day discussing the same thing, because all superintendents are in unanimity wanting that approval, as you brought up, Mark. So.
What part of the thumb does the state have on us? What kind of legislation is that? That we as a district can't say, what law is on the book says West Hartford can't call it snow day?
State Board of Ed still controls the number of days, and their response was, you have to make up any day that's a snow day.
Okay, so why can't we say not a snow day, it's an online learning day? There's a way around it.
That's what multiple of us superintendents have said that we'll do to see what the state's response is.
It's right, instead of a snow day.
Well, yeah, I mean, I agree with you. And your point is exactly my point, that it strains credulity that you won't make that leap at the state and just make that shift. But the State Board of Education has to vote on that. So.
Can you talk about whether Wednesdays would still be Wednesdays, or would they be like every other day? And maybe you don't have the answer yet, but just raising the question.
You just made me pause for a minute when I was looking at Paul like, I don't want to say this wrong. Wednesdays would still be professional development days, as we asserted during the summer for our teachers. Our teachers need that time more than ever really. So as far as what would the Wednesday look like at the middle school and high school, that dismissal may be earlier to follow that schedule so that we can do joint professional development with all 3 levels. But more to come on that. So yeah, it would be it would maintain, but it wouldn't be the exact same schedule as last year, but it would be still a professional development day.
The students would be in school that day.
Students would be in school.
Great.
Oh, yeah, that's a good point, because there's many districts, Deb, many districts in the state, Wednesday is an at-home learning day for all students. And we have chosen not to do that. Our week-on, week-off model is kind of the reason we haven't done that. So it would still be an in-school day with all students back. Again, we still have the time for deep cleaning afterwards, so yeah, thanks.
Great, thank you. All right, so we will move on. Thank you very much for that report. And we're going to move on to staff reports and board discussions. And our report tonight is the high school advanced placement test score results. And we're going to have a report from Mr. Paul Vycinis and Ms. Ann McKernan.
Well,
Good evening,
everyone. Pleasure to present, and I'd like to start with an introduction of Ann McKernan, who is my Director of Secondary Education. She's one of 2 right hands for me. It's kind of lopsided when I go to sign things, but she also has the privilege of being our district testing coordinator. So she liaisons with the schools to help, and with the state of Connecticut, Department of Education, College Board, and many other entities in order to help us make sure that our state testing goes off flawless. And so I'm pleased to have her join tonight and bring her expertise to the table. I also want to share for the public viewing that I've distributed PowerPoint slides and hard copy to all in attendance here, and we will have those published up on our website following this meeting so that anyone can take a look at those. And again, we're here to present the results of the AP testing for last year for 2020. And in terms of the agenda, we'll quickly walk the board through, especially given some new board members. And again, I apologize for those for whom my back is to. But we'll quickly walk through what our district philosophy is relative to AP examinations. It is somewhat unique in the state, and it is a hallmark for the district. And I think that it is a national hallmark. And then we will present for you student participation in a number of exams. So sort of the opportunity. We'll present exam performance, and we'll talk about the AP Excellence and Equity Rating, which is a measure of achievement. We will talk through our opportunity and achievement gaps for our target populations, and then we'll also talk about AP Scholars and notable achievements of students before opening it up for questions. And so I'd like to begin then, I'll turn to the slide on district philosophy and really talk about why AP and what's our philosophy at West Hartford Public Schools. And this is something that's been fairly long-standing and has been dramatically successful. At the end of the day, our philosophy is one of inclusion versus exclusion. We don't look at AP as this elite, inattainable kind of a construct that it is sometimes made out to be, but instead we look at it as an opportunity that we want to try to afford for every student. Because at the end of the day, if we're preparing our students for college and careers, and if we really believe in the AP curriculum, which I do, the strength of the curriculum is unquestioned. We want to find the way by which to offer that opportunity to every student and to be able to look at the wide array of courses that the College Board offers and find that one class that any one student who doesn't picture themselves as an AP student might aspire to take by the time they're a 12th grader at the least. And so we're really chasing the experience. We're not chasing the scores. There's much to be said of that, because beyond just the content that can get learned in the AP, there have been dramatic studies that demonstrate that the skills and the perseverance and the behaviors and the habits of mind really are great predictors of success, well beyond what a student might have earned in a score. So even that student that struggles in the AP class, maybe they get a 2, but they've taken that one class, they're proven to be more successful, whether that be college or career moving forward. we'd be lying if we didn't talk about AP in terms of how colleges view it relative to strength of transcript. Schools don't necessarily look for a certain number of AP exams. Sometimes students think, well, I need to have 3, I need to have 4, I need to have 8. What colleges are looking for is, what are the courses that your school offers, and did you avail yourself, and to what degree of the courses that are more rigorous. So it does have bearing on college acceptance, but it's beyond just the potential for credit, because sometimes schools will accept the credit, and that's certainly one less course you have to take, which has a financial positive implication for parents and or flexibility within college programming, but it's also advanced standing. You might also waive out of a course or something else, be able to take a different course beyond just guaranteed credit. All that being said, that's kind of our philosophy. It's important to note, and you may know or realize or heard something about 2020 was a little bit of a different year for AP, just given the fact of COVID. So I'm going to ask Ann if she can kind of describe some of those differences, AP testing briefly, what it looked like last year in comparison to most years.
Thank you, Paul. If we go back to March of last year, we saw the children leaving school and wondering, what's going to happen to my AP exam that I've been really studying for quite a while? And so we were anxious to hear how the College Board would handle the change, because it was a very big change for them. As you may know, a typical AP test is over 2 hours, approximately 2 hours, and it's a pen and paper test, and it's done in school in May. And so this was a big lift for them to be ready, but they were. And they offered all of our students approximately a 45-minute test online from their homes. Instead of multiple choice or things that students could look up for answers, they had free response questions, typically 2 free response questions. As I said, there was no multiple choice. They shortened the amount of material that would be presented in the exam. So instead of the full content, the full curriculum, they assessed approximately what was covered at the point we went out till March. So many courses might have 8 units or 7, and 4 were tested, and they communicated those very clearly to all stakeholders. So we all knew the breadth of the exam. They gave a lot of support through free online classes that you could take. I think it was called AP Live last year, and it's called AP Daily this year, and they continue to build their library of classes taught by some of their most well-regarded AP teachers around the country that kids can just tune into this year as well as last year and get instruction. And of course, over the last few years, College Board has built up something called the AP Classroom, which is a series of resources that every student has. So we encourage students to use AP Resource, AP Classroom, AP Daily, ensured that they knew that the assessment, the test would not cover as much material, and then really had them focus on their free response questions instead of, let's say, multiple choice. With all that, the test was also open notes, so the students could sit with their notes open during the test. There was no gotcha. I'll give you an example. In world language, they really focused on the oral part of world language instead of the reading and the writing, perhaps. And there were small hiccups, but given the fact that they gave and Tom probably knows much more than I do in terms of numbers they gave nationally, but they gave millions of tests this way, and with very few hiccups. They allowed a generous number of makeup sessions that students were able to participate in if something went wrong with their testing window. So all in all, given how big of a change it was, it went quite smoothly. In terms of the outcome, nationally, their scores were close to being in line with where they had been in previous years. For instance, this test is scored, I think Paul might have said, on a 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5 basis, 5 being the highest score a child can receive. And nationally last year, the number of students who received a 5 was up about 1.6%. And the number of students who received a 4 was up about the same amount. The number of students who received a 3 was pretty much the same as it had been in the last few years. And the number of 2s were down just under 2% as the number of ones. And West Hartford saw the same type of change, where we saw about half the number of students receiving a 1. We went from about an 8% of our kids might receive a 1 to 5. We saw a decrease in the number of students who had received a 2 on the test, from about 16% down to 14. Our 3s were relatively flat. About 27% of kids received a score of 3, and last year that was the same. And our 5s and 4s went up just a little bit in both categories. So overall, we did very well, and Paul will walk us through the details. But it was a real interesting change to see that organization lift everything up, communicate all of this. Our teachers were great. They adjusted, got to know AP Classroom and Live better, adjusted their approach, and focused on what mattered, and our kids did really well. So it was a success story all the way around, given what we were facing.
And just to jump on one of the things Ann talked about, I mean, the exams, over 5 million exams given, which is incredible, and really a 6-week turnaround for the College Board. But what was cool is the AP, which is now the AP Daily. So you have these world-renowned professors and the best teachers in the country teaching daily lessons that kids can sign into if they miss something. But they went on beyond that with some AP master classes. So like you can go online right now and watch Lin-Manuel Miranda's AP US History course that he taught last year. That was 45 minutes. Janet Yellen from the Federal Reserve did a 45-minute class for AP Econ. Neil deGrasse Tyson, I think, did a physics class. So, I mean, these kind of really cool guest lecturers came in and had millions of views, and kind of, I think, also kind of upping, I don't know, I guess the cool factor of some of these things that really ended up just being, you know, it started really thinking about rural America and how can AP Daily, especially for this year, as the College Board knows nationally, we've got areas of the country that are going to be all online and won't be able to offer the same things. Well, how can they reach those kids? And now the benefit is our kids get the benefit of that too, not just the kids that are at home, but anybody that's taking any one of our classes. You're weak on an area. It's kind of a built-in, almost Khan Academy-esque type of lesson for that class. So just tremendous resource that we're getting our teachers up to speed on too.
So, and the final note on all of that background is that the College Board did a dramatic amount of research with universities and colleges across the country, and the vast
majority of them said that they would be accepting the credit of last year's, different type of AP exam because they believe in the model that the College Board produces. And so that's all to our students' benefit. So as I take a look at student participation and the number of exams, I've given you kind of a blown-up graphic of the graph that is in the report that's online. And the whole purpose of this really is not just to highlight the 1,173 students, all right, distinct human beings between Conard and Hall that took exams last year, but the trend that we've seen over basically 20 years, a trend that we continue to see, and that is that if you kind of go back to 2003 and you look at from that period to 2020, we've doubled the number of students that are participating in our AP program amid, at the high schools, that's amid only somewhere between a 5 and 6% increase in population. So it's not like our schools got bigger and we had a proportionate number of kids taking the tests. We simply opened the door and said, we'd like you to consider taking the test. And the kids have come in and done it. And they've done so as you turn the page and look at numbers of exams. We see that we've also slightly doubled the number of exams that have been administered to a total of 2,455 last year. That is, every year, I've been doing this for about 6 years, I think, and every year I came to the table just astounded, like, I can't believe we broke the record from last year again. It took COVID for me to finally come up here and say we didn't break every record. I think we broke one of them. But every single year we had somehow increased the number of exams, the number of students, the AP Excellence and Equity rating. And just because of where we are this past year, we're slightly below, we're 50 exams fewer than our previous 5-year average. But nationally, it is fairly dramatic. We average about 2.1 exams per student. And that's interestingly, that's only slightly higher than the national average. The national average is somewhere around 1.8 exams per student. So the real difference is we're allowing more of our students to participate. It's not that our students are being pressured to take more exams. Our data does not reflect that. Our data simply reflects we're allowing a greater number of students into the program. And if you turn the page, kind of talks about that our participation rates, a different way to look at this increase in the number of students. This was a participation rate metric that Chip Ward had introduced years ago, where he said, well, hey, AP exams are typically, built for juniors and seniors generally, although we do have some sophomores who participate. And so if I take the total number of juniors and seniors in a class, and I take the total number of students who participated, I'd be interested to see what the participation rate is. And you see the trend, how it has increased, just basically reflecting another way to look at that. Our average for 2020 was 80.5, and that was slightly down from last year, where we hit, where we had a high overall as a district of 87. But the true participation rate on the next page. The true participation rate is, well, how many kids were sitting in an AP class and took an AP exam? And so the true participation rate is 83%. We had 2,783 total seats, total number of students enrolled in an AP class. So it's not 2,783 students, because I might be sitting in 2 AP classes taking up 2 seats, but we had that many possible exams we could have given, and we gave 83% of those exams, which is pretty much on par, slightly lower last year due to some COVID pieces that I'll talk about, but pretty much on par with where we have been historically. We did not take a big hit. As usual, we have some favorite classes that kids kind of just run to. AP Biology, AP English Language, AP Government and Politics, and AP US History. They stand out as courses with nearly 200 students taking the exam, which is a 90% or higher exam participation rate in the class, and averaging score above a 3.0. In fact, the averages were published in the report, but I believe they were in and around a 3.5, which is very strong. So that kind of talked through opportunity, who's taking classes, what chances are they? We'll talk about achievement, but go ahead.
Just one thing, because this gets lost by time, and it's, Paulie and I are clearly getting up there, because when we became administrators at Conard, the board goal, which was the #1 goal, which seemed impossible, was 60%. They set an exceptionally high bar that it would be 60% of students would take this. Neither school was at that. Now we're routinely at the numbers Paul's talking about. And that was a lot of work by a lot of people to open our AP classroom. And there was a time when Rosine and Paul and I were at Conard on the leadership team there. You had to prove it. So this was that honors pipeline. And some of you that have been around long enough will remember that this keeping kids out of honors that we saw in the middle school, and that kept them from taking challenging courses at the high school. And I just, if we could go back in time 13 years, that goes back to Paul going through every 8th grader, and us looking at the scores and personally calling parents, and instead of saying we don't think your child should be in this class, we called 65 parents and moved them into honors class that hadn't signed up for it when they came into the high school. And that worked, and it was a long slog to get people to see that there's no such thing as an AP kid. Material's material. If a child believes in themselves, our existence should not be to tell them why they can't believe in themselves. And The underlying story that's stunning about this, everybody said it would just water down our courses, and we have the history background of looking at it. Our scores haven't gone down. That's the thing, is that we've gone from this number of kids to this number, and we've stayed stable.
Absolutely. And I wish my graph went back further than 2005. You can see where Tom's talking about, where we had only 40% or 43% of students participating. And this is not just taking the test. This is taking at least one test and scoring a 3 or above on it. So this is having success in the test. And we have moved that up over this period of time as that graph reflects up to that above that 60% mark as a district averaged out. Ann talked about the scores, the fact that on an AP exam you receive a score of a 1, 2, 3, 4, or 5, with a 3 being considered generally passing. Our average exam score, and that's one way to measure achievement, is to look at an average exam score of 3.5. But it's hard to know what's the difference between 3.5, 3.2. So really, we have two other metrics. One is the percentage of students passing an AP exam, and then as you'll see on the next slide, we talk a little bit more about what College Board refers to as the excellence and equity rating. So first off, the percentage of students who have received a three or higher on exams was 81%. So of all students participating in AP, 81% of them have earned a 3 or higher last year. To put that into context, back in 2003, we had 600 students and 1,047 exams. Our average score at that point was a 3.5. Since that time, with 80% scoring a 3 or above. Since that time, we have 1,173 students this year, nearly double, and we have 2,655 exams, 2.5 times the number. And our average score is a 3.5 with 81. So to Tom's point, will it water down the curriculum if we enable more students in? Absolutely not. Absolutely not. This other metric, the AP Equity and Excellence Rating, is the percentage of graduating seniors who have taken at least one AP exam and earned a 3 or higher during their 4 years. We earned a 61.8% on that last year as a district. That's the second highest rating that we have achieved since the College Board has started reporting that. So again, it's a tremendous success. We always have areas, we're always mindful of our areas and our opportunities for growth. And one of the things that we'll always report on is our opportunity and achievement gap for our students of color. So on the next slide, we have a graphic for this, and we defined for this purpose, just to be clear on that, we're defining the subgroups that we're looking at as reported by the College Board are Black students, Hispanic students, or students who are reporting as 2 or more races. So defining that group and looking at a 10-year trend in performance, and looking first at total students and total exams just to measure opportunity. Are students availing themselves? Are we promoting a climate in which they see themselves as being able to take tests? We see that we've moved from 94 students back in 2010 to 227. We've moved from 195 total exams to more than double at 437. And you can see, and we've done percentages within your report, so you see the relative comparisons of how many exams have we gone up overall to show that this has really been a specific area of strength with students of color taking greater advantage of that. We also see, and we had been reporting on this for a number of years, we had very good exam scores in these categories, but we still had a sizable gap. We're very happy to report that this year that gap was significantly reduced. You can see the average score, but I'm looking more at the percentage of students earning a 3 or above. And you can see that this year in 2020 it was 75.5, up over 12 points from the 10-year average, and up roughly an equal amount from last year. Last year, that number was in the 60s. I have it written here in my notes, if I can see. I have a lot of stuff written down here. And so the gap between our students of color and the district of 81 was essentially slashed from 13% last year down to about 6% this year. I did break that out to look at that across our different subgroups themselves, across Black students, Hispanic students, and students with 2 or more races. And I would let you know we have seen basically stable performance under our Black students in terms of both the number of students that we have and their performance. And the group that's been growing in the district a little bit more has been our Hispanic population. They're the ones in terms of we see more movement in terms of total enrollment, so they're a growing population. They've equally been growing in our AP percentages for opportunity, so they're a driver on this number, and their performance, their achievement performance has been strong. I did receive a question, is there the ability to we have 39 students in our high schools that are enrolled in the open choice program. Only 12 of them are currently juniors and seniors. And of those 12, only 2 of them are taking AP classes. So it's a very small N. So what I do need to do, if you're interested in that metric, is I will need to look at probably more of a 5-year capture and be able to report on that, but I'm happy to do so.
And just as a reason for that, historically, we've seen our growth in open choice. We really opened up open choice more 7 years ago. So the high schools right now are still reflecting, so we try to accept at kindergarten, first grade, so that they're here throughout their time. So we'll start seeing that shift at the high school over the next 2-3 years.
Our last slide kind of summarizes and disaggregates a little bit by our 2 high schools, their performance overall, looking at the 5-year trend for the percentage of students earning a 3 or above. And it's important, and you can see the upward trend for this year, and you can see some of the ebb and flow, although a very up near 80% or over 80% and 85% at different schools. Important to point out that the national average on this measure is only 65%. And hey, we're from the Northeast. We do a little bit better than the national average. The Connecticut average is around 68%. So the fact that we're posting these numbers up at the 80% mark continuously is just a testament, and doing so with a much broader population invited to the table than anywhere else. Some additional comparisons on the next slide. Conard and Hall, really they talk about the fact what are the most popular courses, what did the student breakdown look like, and you can see some pretty close numbers overall when you're looking at student achievement and equity and excellence. Both schools have posted their second highest ratings on the equity excellence in their history. And earlier when we talked about, one of the big things, one of the big differences that's here that at least bears a mention, should anyone have questions, is some of the stability in the participation at Conard, and there was a modest decline from last year over at Hall. Last year, we were so happy to report just the dramatic gains that Hall had made, and they were starting to kind of have that shift in their culture so that more students saw themselves as AP students and were availing. And I think this year there were 2 factors that kind of had them take a half step back on that. First was, of course, the COVID and the concerns, this test is new, and so they just didn't have that longevity, I think, of confidence with the broader population. Clearly, I don't want to take anything away from them. They have phenomenal numbers with 500 plus students participating with over 1,000 exams, but just a slight decline from their high last year, and it sort of gives you pause. The other variable that weighed in on this that didn't have a big impact, and I was very pleased, and bears mentioning just based on the timing of the year, is the registration process. Last year in the fall was the first year of this new registration process for AP exams, where you register at the beginning of the year, where normally you have a little bit of time to get to know who your teacher is, get your feet wet in the curriculum, gain some confidence. So we had some big numbers registered at the 2 high schools. But that also may have been a variable that then, just because it was so new and then the test got changed, we lost a few. And we're looking to regain those this year because we're dramatically proud of both of our high schools. They're doing amazing jobs. And you can see some of that just to kind of close out the slides and then open this up for questions with some of the AP distinctions and scholars. We talked a few years ago about what this AP diploma program is with the seminar course and the research, and just what a dramatic, exciting thing. This is our 4th year in the formalized program, 5th year really as we piloted it. We had 15 certificates this year and 22 diplomas, and that's kind of been right on track with where we've been in that neighborhood. And we'll be excited to grow that because it's such an amazing opportunity. And then on the last slide with the AP scholars, 2020, even with COVID, even with a new exam, was very much on par with previous years. We had 186 students identified as AP scholars, 91 as scholars with honor, 201 as scholars with distinction, and 43 as national AP scholars. Students that have earned a 4 or higher on 8 different exams and averaged at least a 4.0 on every exam taken. I mean, that's kind of a dramatic statistic, and I can't even give the perspective necessary for the volume of scholars that West Hartford produces in its public schools by comparison to other schools. I will say this, one record that we were sad to lose. For the last, I think, 4 years, we had the distinction of having at least one of only the 2, what were they called? The Connecticut State Scholar, 1 male and 1 female. And for 4 years running, we had one of them. And this is the first time we don't have. I haven't even looked up who has that honor this year. But we got an international diploma instead, so we're doing okay. With that, I'll open it up to your questions or discussion.
Thank you. Do board members have questions? Mark?
Thanks, Paul. You mentioned the decline at Hall, and well, have you looked at the school choices they make and what number the test score is that those schools accept? So if you look at the diversity of Hall's acceptance rates at different schools, let's just use UConn for example, they only take a 4 or a 3.
Yeah.
Okay, a 3. I thought it was higher than that. There's certain schools that do go higher than that. And they chose not to do it because maybe one, they got accepted already or things like that and such. And then if you could talk, or maybe you have the numbers, how do we compare against our DIRG B? Because we always get compared to that. And, maybe even, we talk about what number we are in the rankings in Connecticut, and how do we compare to the other schools that we rank in Connecticut, like the top 10, and where we fall?
Multiple. We can talk about the college tracking.
Go ahead.
The college tracking, actually, we're now at 24 states that have mandated that their public universities accept a 3 or above, and that was, as recently as 5 years ago, it was 3 states. So major public universities are mandated to accept 3s or above.
You hit on one of the key elements, especially last year, is that if you were already accepted into a college, that's where we saw some drop off in people choosing to take the test still. And that's been something, just to be frank, it's taken longer to get that at Hall, to get that I'm going to take the test anyway, whereas that's been the philosophy at Conard for a while. So it's a good point. That may be something where a senior, that would affect a senior if I'm already in somewhere and I know that that's not going to be accepted, or I know it doesn't matter because of this, then I may not choose to spend the $88, $90 to take that exam. So that's a good point. We try to say to people, take it. That's like practicing all year and not playing in the game. And we also say that as much as we don't believe people are going to transfer, people transfer from colleges, and having that credit there for you, just in case, is really important. One of the things, some colleges will accept the credit but not replace the course. So like you'll get a general credit, but you won't get replacement for that course. So yeah, it depends on the place, but the the distribution between Hall and Conard in terms of places applied to versus where they choose to go to, there's a slight out-of-state and a slight private lean from the Hall side of town. So that could have an impact. Sorry.
Not at all. That was great. I was going to tell you, I haven't done that research. So, and I'm going to apologize. Can you remind me of the...
B in the top 10.
Okay, thank you. I want to give you some specific numbers around Dirk B. I did not look up Dirk B for this year, but in general, where we have looked, I have looked up Dirk B and other districts in the past, just to get a sense for how does West Hartford compare. And at the end of the day, the difference is there are a number of districts that will post some similar average scores, percentage of students getting 3 or above. But then when you roll it back and look at what percentage of students are participating in their program, that's where West Hartford demonstrates the dramatic difference. So our achievement is, there are other districts that are high achieving as we are. I mean, an average score, this is a great point. The average score this year went up to a 3.5 from a 3.4 last year. We had roughly in the neighborhood, I have to look up the number, but it's 50 or 60 fewer students. 50 or 60 fewer students creates this 1-point gain in achievement because you have some students that are self-selecting out of confidence. Gee, I don't feel like I'm an A+ student. Maybe I'm only a B student. I'm not going to do it. Well, hey, B student, you're still capable of getting that 3, that 4, that 5. Our average score is not going down dramatically. You're passing. That's that confidence ratio. That where we see that, and that's why we're never really about chasing the score itself. If we can be doing 3.1 or above, we're doing strong work, and there's a mile of difference between an average score of 3.5 and 3.1 when you're talking about 2,500 exams. It's a mile of difference. So. Long story short, our achievement is on par with the DIRG. It doesn't beat the DIRG, but it beats the DIRG when you factor in the fact that we've got an AP excellence and equity ratio of over 60 points, and they probably have one in and around 45 or something. I would need to look theirs up.
I'm going to disagree just on one piece. I would say it does beat the DIRG because it's an area where we're on par or better universally with the DIRG. But if you take our free-reduced lunch, first, I mean, West Hartford gives the most AP
exams in the state. We're the 10th largest district, the most exams given. But then you take it a step further. Once you go through the number of exams given, and then you break it down like the U.S. News and World Report ratings and things like that, the school that's in the rankings after Conard and Hall, or Hall and Conard, however you want to say it, with the next highest free and reduced lunch is Simsbury High School, which is 1/5 of the free and reduced lunch rate of Hall, 1/6 of the free and reduced lunch rate of Conard. So if there's a hallmark to West Hartford and what we do, and it starts in kindergarten at the education there, you can't just go in. It's in getting kids ready to be able to take college level courses before their time they go to college. Because one of the central reasons we believe in an advanced placement course is if you're going to take a college class, take one in high school with the structures around you, with the safety net, with your family, and get ready for it. So, yeah.
I'm just going to jump in and remind us not to acronymize. So DIRG B, District Reference Group B, is the group of districts that the state has categorized West Hartford as being a part of. So districts that are similar to West Hartford in size and socioeconomic status.
Well,
ish.
A horrible anachronism in that it was created 25 plus years ago, and so the ones we're supposedly like are Simsbury, Farmington, Avon, Greenwich. We're nothing like them really, other than an achievement.
Okay, thank you. Other questions? Liz?
Yes. So, Paul, you talked about how 83% of the students who are enrolled in APs are signing up to take the test. And I'm just wondering, is that typical of other school districts? And I'm also wondering, you might not have this information, but back in 2005, was that typical that close to 20% were sitting out?
I don't have that information in front of me. I can certainly get it for you. I would say that again, it's not atypical. You'll have districts where you have a very limited AP enrollment, and they have a very high participation rate. And then when you look at their average scores, and we have, we had a course a couple of years ago where I would look and I would see 25 students, 25 out of 25 would take the exam, and the average score was a 4.7. And instead of calling up and saying, hey, you guys are doing a great job, I said, hey, you guys aren't letting enough students in. You're letting in these 25 kids that can take the exam without you as a teacher and pass it. By virtue of that score, you should be looking to really significantly increase your enrollment in the course, get more kids in it, hopefully get them to participate, and don't chase the score, chase the experience, because you will make more students successful. And so that's the real comparison. You will see places that if you just look at their participation metric, they'll have a high participation, but if you look at their enrollment, they'll have a low enrollment, and so that's kind of like a false figure. Truthfully, for us, 83%, we've been higher than that. We've been upward to 87% and approaching 90%, and I think we had an off year last year with COVID, and I do expect that we'll rebound strongly from that this year.
I just wanted to add to that I watched the number of kids who were we collect their information as they're signing up for the test, and there was drop off at the end a little bit, and I do feel like nerves played a role in it. Would the children questioning themselves, would they be prepared given they were remote? And their teachers did a fantastic job, and the scores indicate that everything went very well, but there were a number of kids who at the end, very late, decided not to take the test, and I think it was just nerves around the change in their learning environment to online. So if we hadn't had a COVID year, I believe we would have been in the 87, 88, 90% range. I think it's just an anomaly of moving to the online and all the pressures that came with that, and then thinking of a big test. Thank you.
Thank you. Ari?
I don't know if any of the differences are significant if we were to do the math, but it does seem like there's a consistent trend with regard to number of students taking the test, kind of every category, that there's a discrepancy between the two high schools, with Connor being more, participating more in the AP exams. And I'm just wondering if you have thoughts or ideas of why there is this consistent discrepancy between the two schools.
It's really just, I want to just say it's time in the game. I know Tom and I can point back to when Chuck Landrosch was first principal. I think he kind of started a movement at the school that became adopted to become a district movement to open the doors to AP. And so I do feel like there's probably pretty much a 5-year head start at one of our schools. And if you map that data and look at it, you'll see that has definitely become part of the culture of both high schools, but it's got a firmer grounding, and I think you just see some of those subtle differences. And last year's report was the time when Hall really played catch up, and they posted just phenomenal, strong numbers that kind of erased those differences. And again, that's where we see a 1-year blip, but we know that both schools are on that trajectory, and neither school, at some point we're putting a microscope up to kind of a Mona Lisa and identifying some of the small flaws. Not to say that that's wrong, because that's the same thing that we do in our offices when these things come out, and we're just always not being complacent with our success, but saying, let me dig a little deeper. Let me dig a little more into the achievement gap. Let me dig a little bit more and have an understanding of who are the kids that we can still advantage by providing them opportunity, providing them support, providing them experience. That's what we're after.
brought Conard on a forefront with Hall in terms of achievement, in terms of people's perceptions. I mean, we're living in a unique time in that you talk to real estate agents or others, and people are looking at, I'm thinking about moving to West Hartford, which high school, and it's a matter of preference. They're both great high schools, both rated A+ on every metric, both gold medal high schools. That wasn't always the case. And so it's kind of, I mean, I think it's fair to say, Conard for a few years had a chip on its shoulder and really went above and beyond proving itself. And this was a metric to do that. And I think, it's hard to say. It's just, they're different places. There's a different feel in some cases. There's a different mindset in some cases. And, but I think we're all universally pleased with the performance of both places, other than Julio last year when Dan finally caught up at Hall. So that was Julio's moment.
Oh, go ahead, Mark, and then Lorna.
Yeah, there's also a trend at Hall during that same time where AP classes were considered out of a lot of people's leagues, and there was a push to say, instead of coming in, well, no, not you. So that combined with what you just talked about, I think is important to Ari's question to recognize.
Thank you. Lorna?
Thank you very much. A question and then a comment. With the question, looking at the information on page 11, giving the exam results for different subject areas, and we can see for the most part there is some consistency between the schools within one subject, but then there is some variability if it's the same subject in the performance from one school to another. Again, the same subject, I imagine the material is the same. What are your thoughts to that?
So this is one of the things that we will generally pour over, and the one thing that kind of jumped out to me this year more than anything, one of the, there's a couple of courses that end up with some significant enrollment, and they don't necessarily have, when you look across the spread of all the percentages of threes or higher, they don't necessarily have the same threes or higher. Some of those courses are some of the introductory AP courses that are a stretch course for a lot of kids. I can point to, not picking on anyone because they're different numbers in both groups, but environmental science is one that jumps out to me. Environmental science has historically been one of those courses that we can get a lot of students into the class to try the opportunity to take the test, but we haven't always had that same measure of success that we've had, say, in an AP calculus. But it's not a fair comparison in one regard, because there are 7 years of coursework that prepare you specifically for AP Calculus. Math is a very sequential curriculum. It's on that pathway. In environmental science, you take some earth science and some things. The thing that jumps out at me for that class is this year, if I go back and look at the total number of seats, number of students that were there, I believe that they're probably going to be a lot closer than the 37 and the 58 reflect. So I do believe in some cases that 58 that you're seeing on one side with a lower percentage of threes and higher is more students taking the test. Whereas we had perhaps a more roughly equal number of students in the classes, but a fewer percentage, those who were more confident, those who were more well prepared taking the test. Therefore, the percentage of students getting a 3 or higher looks stronger. Generally speaking, where we see, because we've had a couple of courses, there's another course in particular where we'll note this teacher's really knocking it out of the park with their numbers, and over here we're not seeing that same success. So what do we think is happening? And in most cases what we're doing is we're saying, all right, well, let's get these two teachers talking to each other, because often as an AP teacher you're a singleton. You don't have that partner next door that you can necessarily knock on and ask questions. So we get them together. We'll provide professional development to our teachers to make sure. And then, as Tom mentioned earlier on, the wealth of resources that are now available to our teachers and to our students through the College Board is simply dramatic. They're making a lot of efforts to create as many opportunities for students as possible to broaden their horizons and get them into the program. So you have AP Classroom, you have AP Daily videos, you have any number of things that I only wish I had when I was an AP teacher. So that would kind of be my short answer without trying to step on anyone's toes.
Understood, and thank you for the response, and it segues well into my comment. You made reference in talking about over the years, and I recall you sharing this over the years as well, giving updates on AP results, how there was a time when not as many students were allowed to take the exam, and how there now is a philosophy, a principle, an attempt to welcome more to take the exam. And as you were speaking, you made reference to confidence ratio, and I think that speaks volumes in terms of perception and mentality, where if a student is being taught by someone who is conveying a sense of confidence in you and your ability, that's going to influence and impact how you perform. And I think that speaks true to it's not just what is taught, but it's how it's being taught as well. So thank you for continuing to demonstrate that ability, that it's how it's being taught, and encouraging all students to have an opportunity to take the exam, because students deserve that right.
Absolutely, and I would only echo the thing that Tom said. It's a K-12 effort, and so every teacher in the district really has, a piece to celebrate with these results.
Jason?
All right, thank you. I wanted to echo some of the strengths and advantages of the AP program, being a UConn professor and seeing students that come to UConn with AP experience. They are more curious, perhaps not more curious, but they express their curiosity a lot more, and they get more out of those first years when they enter. And there's a tremendous economic benefit to getting college credit, and to see this kind of participation rate in the district is tremendous. And really want to thank everyone for making that happen. Paul, I want to thank you for responding with, kind of breaking down the student of color numbers. And, one of the things, my expectation was that included Asian Americans, and that perhaps their inclusion might have shadowed Black and Latino students. And so, I'm glad to hear that these numbers reflect those. But I'm also kind of puzzled how Asian Americans don't fit into that category. And I understand why. There are a number of reasons why that happens. But also curious how their participation numbers. And I know that that's not something that you can perhaps respond to now. But it is a curiosity, especially given that the Asian American population is really diverse and has a number of inequities within that category to consider. And one of the other things that I had asked, I know this is time is scarce, but I wondered if you had any thoughts on the gender divisions within AP seats and testing.
Thank you, and I apologize. I meant to mention the gender, and I thought of it after I stopped making comments. I'll look for my notes on it. First, in terms of your first comment, I'd be glad to include Asian Americans within our breakdown. I have looked at that historically. It's not just been a feature of the report, but not because it doesn't bear scrutiny. By and large, our Asian population has done very well on the exams. It is reported out separately, so that data is very easy for me to pull up some historical trends and provide that. So I'll look to do that in the future with my reports. Apologize for that oversight. In terms of the gender breakdown, that is something that I looked at specifically based on your question, and I looked at it over a course of the 5-year trend, and essentially it was interesting, and it's a similar explanation to what I was sharing with Mark with some other districts. Our male population takes less advantage. They have a slightly lower percentage in terms of opportunity participation, and therefore their achievement is slightly skewed higher than our females. Our females are much braver and bolder, and they're taking greater advantage. They have a higher participation rate relative to percentage of eligible students. They don't have any deficiency in their achievement rate, and I have probably, if I pop my computer open, I could throw some numbers at you. But they're edged out by the males, and I really think that's a question of the breadth of participation over anything else. And that's a pretty consistent trend over a number of years.
Thank you.
Any other questions? Sure.
Another quick comment. You touched on this in terms of recognizing the importance of the K through 12 experience, and I definitely want to highlight that as well, having young ones in elementary and middle school, and definitely appreciate the level of confidence that their teachers from yay high on up have instilled in them, and absolutely that's important to carry them through. So thank you for recognizing that point, and thank all of you for doing that.
Great.
Thank you. Any other questions? All right, thank you very much. We will now move on to routine matters, and the first item is approval of the minutes. So I will look for a motion to approve the minutes from the September 9th regular Board of Education meeting. Can I have a motion?
So moved.
Thank you, Amanda. A second? Second, Lorna. Are there any items for discussion?
Just that we need to correct the spellings of the names of our student representatives, and we'll take care of that. So that's my point.
All right. Any other discussion? If not, I'll try your minds. All those in favor of approving the minutes, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All those opposed say nay. Abstentions? The ayes have it. Thank you. Information and reports. Board members, communications and reports. Are there any reports from other boards and organizations? All right. Any other information and discussions? Moving to non-staff communications and reports, we'll have the reports from our student representatives, and tonight we'll start with Rashil.
So I'm going to talk about three things. The first is the in-school versus online experience. Now that I've been able to participate in both, I can speak on that. The second is clubs, and the third is the in-school SAT that happened today. So going back to the first one, the in-school versus online, I think the general consensus among sort of the student body is that most students, as you might expect, prefer the in-school. The reasons, at least speaking to some of my peers, is that you have more time to interact with your teachers. It's just generally a more interactive environment. And then the general sense of seeing everyone in person makes the classroom experience a lot more enjoyable versus just looking at your computer. And you really can't feel that interaction. And on like the more practical level, I think that everyone has gotten used to the one-way sort of walking around in the hallways. I think at first students were like confused on why that was there, but everyone has like gotten used to that. I think there's been immense discipline in terms of wearing masks and keeping that, and I think everyone has been very cautious and careful throughout the school in terms of even using hand sanitizers and making sure that sort of caution is there. In terms of the online experience, I think overall the experience itself has been, at least from what I've seen, pretty successful. Everyone is on time. The attendance is pretty good, at least in all of my classes that have been there. And then I think the teachers are, it's like the productivity in the class, I think proportionally is very on par with sort of what I've noticed with the in-school. So I think that sort of has been there. I think another aspect of the online, and I think that that's useful, is that I think it makes students to be more independent and also more proactive. since you don't always get that interaction with teachers, I think as a student, I've become more independent and trying to learn things on my own, which is, I think, a good skill to have, as well as also be more proactive in terms of, I think teachers have been very open in terms of reaching out and offering opportunities to meet with them one-on-one via like Google Meet. And in that regard, I think students in general have become more proactive in taking those opportunities. I think some classes actually benefit from online. One of them is band. Since you can't play in person because of the wind instruments, online we can actually all play together through the Google Meet. So in that regard, like that class immensely benefits from the online option. Moving on to clubs, I think that most clubs started a week or two later, and I think the reason is because everyone's getting used to the hybrid model. But I think like the majority of clubs that I know of that have been running in previous school years are also running at the virtual level, like National Honor Society, the junior and senior class boards, the Conard's newspaper has been running, and then even the clubs that I'm part of, math team and science Olympiad, have also been running, and then like competitions associated with each of those clubs have also transitioned to more like virtual events, so clubs can run in that regard virtually. And then the last thing was the in-school SAT. I feel like in taking the test today, just based off my eye test, I feel like a lot of my classmates took advantage of this opportunity. I think everyone was pretty grateful to have this chance, and I think while everyone recognizes that the vast majority of schools have gone test optional for this admission cycle, I think there's this recognition that this test can really only help students. If you do well on it, it's like an extra thing to boost your sort of college application. And also on that note, like a lot of scholarships and even to get into the honors programs at some universities still require test scores. So because of that, I think a lot of my classmates took advantage of taking the in-school SAT today. So that's all I had. Thank you.
Okay, so a lot of the stuff that Rachel mentioned is also happening at Hall. So just as a reminder, this week, the blue group had in-person classes and the red group had remote classes in the afternoons. During remote classes last week and in the beginning of this week, there were some issues with the Wi-Fi going out at the school. So the Google Meets would kind of stop sporadically. But I think as the days have gone by, that Wi-Fi issue has kind of diminished. Like a lot of things with the new schedule, as we have more practice with them, they kind of get worked out on their own. As Rachel mentioned as well, all the seniors took a free SAT this morning to compensate for the canceled in-school SAT last March. And the other grades completed asynchronous learning for the rest of the day today. Also, college visits began last Monday. Juniors and seniors can sign up on Naviance for virtual visits, where they can join a Zoom call with an admissions counselor from the college or university that they're interested in. Virtual club meetings can begin next week on September 28th via Google Meets. And Mrs. Schaefer has encouraged club leaders to make informative flyers and videos about their clubs so that we can have kind of a virtual club fair. There's, I think it's probably on the Hall website, but there's kind of like a virtual club booklet. And I think that the videos will be linked onto the booklet, so anyone interested in the club can click on the video to find out more information. Fall sports have progressed from practices in small cohorts to practices with full teams. Scrimmages will begin on September 26th, and on October 1st, all teams except for football can begin playing games. And just once again, I think I mentioned this at the last meeting, but on behalf of all the students, we are very grateful for our hardworking teachers and staff and their efforts to continue to educate us despite the difficulties that have come with the hybrid learning. So, thank you.
Thank you.
If I could, I'm so glad you mentioned intermittent outages. Last week, at the beginning of the week, I think we saw that a little bit, and I want to take this opportunity so people can hear it, because there's a misnomer out there that it's because we don't have the bandwidth. There's so many people who are on it, and I've heard teachers saying that, and I want to get it out there. Those were actually massive attacks on CEN, the state internet network. They were huge attacks based on ransomware like we saw in Hartford. So there was this constant, so that wasn't a West Hartford issue, that was a throughout the state issue.
Thank you. So just for clarification, that's for when the teachers log on to teach the students who are at home that week in the afternoon?
That was actually like universally where internet service was in and out during the day. Just
In the
because-
buildings, though?
Well, yes, anybody that was using the CEN networks, yes. So yeah, it was centered in the buildings, yeah.
Okay, thank you. All right, great. Future business, announcement of future meeting dates. Our next meetings are Tuesday, October 6th, Tuesday, October 20th, Wednesday, November 4th, and Tuesday, November 17th. Please note that Wednesday date because we are not meeting on election night, which is the day before that. And we'll just take an opportunity to say that since yesterday was National Voter Registration Day, and I have a camera on me, please register to vote. Please register to vote and make a plan to vote. Okay, is there a request for any future agenda items? All right. Are there any visitors who wish to comment? Looks like we don't have any visitors remaining. We do not have an executive session. I will take a motion to adjourn. Motion by Lorna, a second by Liz. Without objection, meeting is adjourned at 8:53 p.m. Thank you, everyone.